Christian, we made it.
We
We're
made
doing
it.
LinkedIn Live together. This is fun.
Battling through the tech issues, but here we are.
Here we are. Now, have you ever done a LinkedIn Live before, Christian?
No, this is the first time.
Awesome. Well, we are now live in the LinkedIn algorithm feeds for people who in the middle of their day are on LinkedIn. And
See how it goes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I really appreciate you jumping in, doing this conversation in this format, in this way. It's a little, what would you say? Unnerving the first couple times you do it because it's live. We can't edit.
No editing.
I am unable to beep you out. And so, we'll keep it that way, but it'll be a fun conversation. I'm pumped that you're here with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to self-censor.
Yeah, that's what. Well, frankly, that's what everybody on LinkedIn does. We only present one version of ourselves there. It's the most unidimensional social media yet. I appreciate that.
I think that's going to be fitting for our conversation today. So that's a good foreshadowing.
That's right. Well, for anybody watching that doesn't know Christian, I didn't know him before 4 or 5 months ago, maybe. And he's really impressed me with his story and a lot of things that have gone on in his history. But he's the president of a technology implementer and reseller known as Tynebridge out in Western Canada. Mm-hmm. So he's got a cool story and background. He's touched a number of other industries. Tynebridge wasn't your first stop. And happy to share how some of that has impacted you over time. But you're also a podcast host, and you're also chair or co-chair a nonprofit in this space. A lot of things to unpack. But we told the audience that today we would talk about conceptually a concept of trust. And we said, hey, let's have a conversation around this idea. And especially because there's an entire conference in cybersecurity called Zero Trust.
Mm-hmm.
And those aren't mutually exclusive, your ideas of trust and zero trust. But it's interesting to use the same words in different ways. And so I kind of wanted to say, hey, we're going to get there. Let's get in there. But tell us a little bit about Tynebridge and the team that you have working at Tynebridge. Mm-hmm. What's going on there? What is Tynebridge? What's going on?
Yeah. So Tynebridge is, as you said, a VAR, a value-added reseller. And not diving in too deeply, but we focus on a concept we call digital trust. And just a quick definition of that, it is the idea of being trustworthy as an organization with the information, the sensitive information that's being entrusted to you. And so as part of that, we combine the 4 core disciplines of cybersecurity, data privacy, data governance, and IT together. And so that's the methodology, and that's what we deliver. And it's actually, even though it makes sense, these disciplines are very siloed typically, but it makes sense to bring them together into a unified approach. And it's actually very difficult to do in real life, is to bring advisors and practitioners who are used to operating in their silo and in their discipline and doing their thing and saying, okay, let's look at what's happening with data. Let's look at the whole big picture. Let's look at the overlaps and blend security and privacy and data governance and IT together. So essentially, that is Tynebridge in a nutshell.
Yeah, I get the bridge part. Also, Vancouver, Western Canada. I get the bridge.
That's right.
So for a company to focus on the integration, right, of numerous business units and what have you, like maybe stepping back, love to hear more about how you have said, okay, if other people are going to trust us with the team, with their information and their security and perhaps the most critical parts of their business. You have to build a team of trust that when you trust Tynebridge, you're trusting a group of people, right?
Sure.
And so maybe I was actually very interested. You've talked a little bit about your team culture and some of the things that you do when building your team. And I just thought that was interesting in our space. Feel free to touch on any of the integrity standards and things that you have internally. But I just thought that was very interesting that instead of hiring subject matter experts, you tried to hire experts who also, have a certain type of, character, as it were. So I'm just kind of curious. Tell me more about how you built a team at Tynebridge, and what is your secret sauce?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say in a lot of corporate cultures, Zach, it's the outward success measures that are valued. And I think, obviously that is important for us as well. We want to achieve milestones and, serve more clients in a more complete way. For sure, that is the case. But, what may not be obvious is I've had a chance to talk with a lot of leaders in business and through the podcast and in life and observe different leaders. And I have found typically as a rule that the higher up a leader is, the more likable they are and the more easy they are to deal with and talk to. Less political, less chip on their shoulder, and they've really developed their character, hopefully, and their people skills, their interpersonal skills. And so that's something that we try to really be intentional about on our team, is to look at that internal progress. And you kind of mentioned it earlier about LinkedIn and this world that we present, this persona that we may present. And I think, I know of folks that present a certain persona on LinkedIn, but then in real life, they're really nothing like that person. And I think, I think about fruit trees as an example. So the type of fruit tree a fruit tree is by the type of fruit that's on that tree. And it's the same with people. The fruit that they bear in their lives represents that internal work that they've done. So, things like patience and self-control and peacefulness and thankfulness and, loving and gentleness and kindness, all of those things represent internal progress. And so we want to really foster and recognize that in our company as much as that external achievement.
Yeah, I think just interacting with you and your team, it's definitely a different vibe in the cybersecurity space, right? And the chip on the shoulder is an interesting, it's not an analogy, I just lost my English terms, but the idea, it's a word picture of somebody who has become perhaps bitter at something, right?
Sure.
And cybersecurity, it's very interesting for anybody to show up and be gracious and humble and peaceful, and still be productive and still hit the milestones of a company, still mitigate risk, still, be able to report on the security of a word. Oh, okay. What is this guy?
Have you heard of this guy?
I have not.
Okay. So it's an ex-Navy SEAL commander named Jocko Willink, and Leif Babin, his, I guess, commander of a platoon, a SEAL platoon. And they were in Ramadi in Iraq in 2006. And so it's basically, they've put together corporate leadership training around battlefield lessons and how that applies in business. And just taking off something you said. So we, as part of our culture, we try to implement what they call the laws of leadership and mindsets for victory. And one of the things they mention is that one of the mindsets or the mentalities is humility. And, having that ego is the enemy. And, the path to greatness and significance really is through humility and serving. So the way that looks for us, we try to serve one another as a team, serve our clients, and serve our vendors in the sense that we want to treat our vendors as if they're clients and see how we can add value to them.
That's very interesting, because also a thing that practitioners in our space fall short on is actually owning any outcomes, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll say, I'll assist you, I'll be your Sherpa, I'll be your guide, but the only person that can actually implement and reduce risk is you. And they make sure to, if anything goes wrong, every vendor I've ever met says, well, you just didn't implement my solution properly. You just didn't do the thing that I asked you to do. Therefore, all the results are you. But if you actually work with somebody who says, it's in our mutual interest that I take ownership of the parts or this process, that's pretty extreme. I
think, I think advisory, like quality grounded advisory from practitioners, is really an important thing. And that's very central to what we do on the advisory side. But there's a workload that our clients have, right? They're already stretched. They're already working on their internal projects. They're already not getting to everything that they need to get to. Now we're coming in and we're adding to their plate and saying, okay, you got to look after your digital trustworthiness, your cybersecurity, and everything else. We've just given you a whole pile more of prioritized advice. And so now go do it. So what we have found over time is that they actually need help with the manpower, the implementation. And so we're starting to step into more of the ownership on that implementation side as well, because advisory, it is good, but on its own without execution, it's frustrating and it's stressful.
Yeah, and that's right. And you're not trying to, what would you say? The word that comes to mind is abrogate. You're not trying to dismiss anybody on their current team and what they own and what the responsibilities are, but it kind of reminds me of the ladder of ownership. I don't know if you've heard this, where it goes, I see something, I say something, I do something, I own something. And what I see cybersecurity practitioners do is often they're like, I see it and I say it, right? And so
my job's done.
And especially like threat detection and alerts and announcements and these SIMs, etc. It's, I see something, I say something. I see something, I say something. And there's the ownership level stops there.
Yes.
So, but there's probably reason for that. And it gets back to this trust thing. It's like, how do I know to trust you, Christian? If you want to own this, cool. But how do I know you're going to do what you say you're going to do?
I think even taking it a step before that, if you think about large, let's say, Big Four accounting firms, and I don't want to really pick on anybody because, they're coming along.
They're all fine to pick on.
But they have very expensive, for example, cyber risk assessments, right? And it's a trusted name, so nobody gets fired for choosing one of those service providers, right? And maybe we'll be that size one day when we grow up as Tynebridge. But for now, they're looking at, they're selling you big, thick reports, and it's done by maybe an accountant who has learned a framework, and then you have a report. And then kind of the next step of, ownership or maturity from there would be, now you need to know what are the priorities. So we're going beyond that and saying, this is what you should do first to really move the maturity needle. But then there's a step beyond that of implementation that we're starting to walk into, where we're actually, helping them do things. Because if you just say, well, I told you, now you should understand and you should know what to do and you should do it. It's like, well, you need some help, you need some rigor. And we also find that for the clients, they need to do their part and own their part as well, because there's certain failure factors that we've outlined and certain success factors that we've outlined for our clients about, having an internal champion, being prepared, being engaged. Because at the end of the day, they can agree to what we're providing for them. They can show up to meetings, but them engaging, them telling us about changes in their environment, them getting executive support, tone from the top. All of those things are part of them owning, knowing, and doing their part as well. So it is really a partnership. And I think just to answer your question about how do we get their trust, well, we can't fit the whole elephant in the front door when we first get to know a company, right? So we have to earn their trust, and usually that's done by solving a problem or two on the front end for them, right? Mm. So we can move the needle a little bit in something that's pressing for them. And what we find are of the top 3 most pressing issues for pretty much every single client would be managing their vulnerabilities on the technical side, right? And there's solutions for that. They can do it themselves, or we can get someone to help them do that. Incident response planning, which is on the policy side. And then on the people side, of course, which is your world entirely, Zach, is the awareness training and the cultural piece. So those 3 things out of the gate, and even solving one of those things, they tend to, appreciate how we work with them, build the collaboration, build the trust, build the bridge, and then we're able to help them solve more problems over time. But it's a relationship that's built over time.
Yeah, I feel that. And I do want to bring in the zero trust thing, but let's set that aside. Let's talk a little bit about so you have to also expand your circle of trust beyond your team to vendors and partners and other people, because you just mentioned you can't do it alone. And actually, cybersecurity is actually a social endeavor more than it is an individual endeavor, and probably not an individual endeavor at all. Yeah. So it's a social community team thing in order to secure anything. Yeah. And so maybe walk us through some of the things in your mind when you're trying to figure out who to partner with. I think that's really helpful for people to hear out there. How do you do that?
Yeah. So just to kind of set the stage for that, and taking off our last topic, Zach. So in solving digital trust for an organization, it's going to take technology, it's going to take the people components, the awareness, the culture components, and it's going to take policies and processes, right? So whether it's a vendor or whether it's an advisor or a company that assesses digital trust maturity, or an individual, there's the solution, and then there's the company, and then there's the person, right? So there's different levels that we're looking at. So for the solution, we're obviously looking at whether it's something that is reliable, whether that's a SaaS solution or a managed service, understanding what the solution does and what it doesn't do. And I know this is something that we've talked about just briefly recently is, if someone says that we are an all-in-one solution, we tend to go, okay, there is no such thing. So we need to just continue the path of diving in and going, okay, delineating what is it that you do, what is it that you do really well, what's okay, and where do you stop, and where are you really not an all-in-one solution. But if Zach or anybody that's listening to this, if you do genuinely find that all-in-one cybersecurity solution, please let me know, because we're definitely interested in seeing if anybody can solve that.
I think philosophically, you actually don't want an all-in-one.
No.
What you want is the convenience of an all-in-one with the power of a multiple community of support, right? And you want whatever set of solutions you put together to actually they themselves get better and improve over time.
Yeah.
And part of the issue with an all-in-one is you're restrained to the level of innovation of that all-in-one.
Sure.
And so whatever is innovative out there in cyber or data governance or what have you, you're unable to bring that in because you're trapped under the convenience model of I just wanted one throat to choke. Yeah. And, I think that's very interesting. Now, having said that,
consolidation is a good thing.
Yeah. The other thing, the thing that I'm still kind of curious about, like maybe we'll take it from the opposite. Like what are red flags to you when talking to like vendors and others? Like tell me the hot takes and the
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on from the actual technical solution, red flags, they're impersonal. A company is impersonal. They're siloed. They're transactional. They're really short-term minded. They're playing checkers instead of being strategic and playing chess and being relational, or really political, or there's a lot of red tape. I'd rather not move forward with that. So that's kind of a batch of things. The other thing is, if they're really just focused on the numbers and they're just wanting a big volume commitment from us, I would rather really build that relationship over time, test the waters, kind of crawl, walk, run first, and let's try it in a sandbox. Let's do some proofs of concepts, fire bullets and then shoot cannonballs kind of thing. Trust and confidence are built over time. So you got to let something breathe and prove itself and show the character. But, on the other side, just to not be so negative and controversial and be positive, we want vendors that have a good reputation according to people that we trust, have a win-win mentality or a win-win-win mentality, which is that our clients will win, the vendor will win, and there's a win for us, and it's sustainable for everybody. They're collaborative, they're professional, and client-centric. So maybe this is a little bit of a hot take as well. So they uphold to our standards at Tynebridge of professional excellence, and they don't show up in a client meeting and leave the client wondering if they're either homeless or part of a motorcycle gang because of their personal hygiene habits or their personal appearance. We really want to present something that is valuable and treat it with the professionalism that deserves. So it would be like, buying a diamond ring, an expensive diamond ring, right, at a jewelry store, and then they bust out this crumpled up brown paper bag and throw the diamond ring in that and present it. I think it's really important to reaffirm professionalism and high standards with your demeanor, the fact that you're showing the client respect and that you're showing up in a professional way to meetings.
What's interesting about your list, Christian, is we didn't really get into the technical aptitude or how much money a company has raised or the brand awareness out there so that they're on your line card.
Yes.
And what you focused on were the relational aspects of the business, the responsiveness, because here's one of the things that I just have a bias about trust.
Yeah.
It's kind of like free speech, right? It's like, it's only important to say you value free speech once somebody says something that offends you, right? Like otherwise it's just kind of
that's the test, right?
Yeah, that's the test. Like the test for trust is showing up when I most need you and can least afford you and can at least afford the time. Yeah. And at least I know I can trust you if you'll show up regardless of what's going on your world when my need is on the table.
Yeah.
And now I know I can trust you. And what's interesting about it is trust is mutual then. It's like if somebody shows up for you, you go, I'm gonna move mountains to show up for them now.
Yes.
And so I think showing up is a phrase around trust that most people don't appreciate, which so I'm curious what your thoughts are about just showing up. And you said showing up professionally, showing up in a way that dignifies the conversation. Great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, expertise and quality of solution is really important, right? So that's kind of the number one thing you look for. It's a non-starter if you can't get past that. But the character and the corporate culture it is really what makes it a sustainable win over time. Because looking for name recognition, and I think often you'll see vendors that have raised a lot of money, and maybe they're really good at raising funds, but they're not really client centric, and maybe they're just feeling like they're beholden to the shareholders all the time, and that can be hit or miss, right? Because the shareholders are just looking for returns oftentimes. VCs and private equity. So, of course, it can be different than that. But yeah, so beyond that, trust is currency in business, right? So we're doing business with our clients, we're doing business with our vendors, and we're triangulating that because it's us and our vendors doing business with our clients together. So our company is called Tynebridge Digital Partners. I wanted to get the word digital trust partners in the name, but it was disallowed over and over again because apparently trust is a financial term, and they're concerned that we would be misrepresenting that term and being a financial company. But anyway, Tynebridge Digital Partners is what we settled on, and so we have a digital partner ecosystem, and there's the typical vetting, but there's that sustainable collaborative business partnership behind the scenes where we try to get to know their character over time, and then that extends into the client relationship as well. So there has to be that trust built with our clients and helping them build trust with their clients as well. Because
have you ever had to fire someone? Have you ever had to fire a vendor or a client or anybody that
you have to talk about that?
I mean, that's the T. I'm happy to talk about it. Yeah, it's live, so you can't edit. Yeah. Be curious if it's a story. Yeah.
Yeah. There are examples that aren't coming to mind, but there is one that we have walked away from because of the reasons I described. So the answers that I gave you earlier were rooted in experience.
Didn't show up when you needed to. Didn't show up in a way that was helpful when you needed them to.
Siloed and political, wanting a big commitment up front, and really poor communication and disjointed internally. So they really didn't have their house in order and squared away, and that really affects things negatively, and very transactional as well. It's just like numbers. Again, the shareholders were there, leadership meetings, go sell. And really the approach that we want to take, if we're doing any selling at all, is to serve, right? Mm-hmm. Selling is, talking at people. We want to really see how we can genuinely help. And the philosophies just clashed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can sense that. There was one time I was, getting to know a guy who was a business coach, right? And he was a great sales guy. Like I was getting on sales calls with him, and this guy was butter. And he's that guy that was selling ketchup popsicles to women in white gloves. Like this was impressive. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, I was getting ready to hire him for at the time, buku bucks, thousands of dollars a month on a retainer kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey man, doing a little get together. Why don't you swing by my house and, hang out this one evening? So I swing by his house, and his house was a mess. Mm-hmm. There were dishes all over the sink. This guy, he was so into sales, he had neglected
everything. His literal house was not in order.
His literal house was not in order. Yeah. And I remember walking away from there, and I'm like, I'm not hiring him. I can't trust him.
Yeah.
With all the things in my life. I can only trust him with this one little segment, and that is how to run a demo and get the emotional needs met of the buyer so that I can sell them something. That's such a small sliver of what I was hoping for in a coach.
Yeah.
And I remember the trust fell simply because his house was not in order.
Yeah.
And it was gross.
Yeah.
So,
red flag.
Right. I know that this could be a semantic thing. Zero trust versus
zero trust.
I know it can be a semantic thing.
Yeah.
most of the time what people mean by zero trust is the practical element of
The zero
access
trust
to
architecture.
zero trust architecture, access to information, who, what, when, and why of information access at any given time. You don't trust, you have to verify in order to gain and retain access to any sort of information.
Yeah.
Cool. Makes sense.
Right.
What I find very interesting is how a number of security people who hold that as an archetype or an architecture for their data personify zero trust in their relationships. They are a paranoid group. And I'm kind of curious, like, where does digital trust really help alleviate that and perhaps balance out with the cybersecurity practitioner? How do they develop digital trust in a world that is increasingly zero trust? And that might be a hard question.
Yeah.
It's one that's on my mind. It's on my mind all the time. And I live in Central Florida, and our backyard is a zero trust conference every year.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild. And then
well, I think I hear what you're saying about the comparison between zero trust and digital trust. And I think really what you're talking about, though, is the zero trust mentality and just regular plain old trust in relationships on an interpersonal level. And you're using the example of security people, or we could even say technology folks, technology experts as well. So let's say IT leaders, IT practitioners, security leaders and practitioners. And I think there's a bit of a communication gap, right? Which I think it's sometimes a bit of a language barrier that brings a bit of alienation between the groups of the technical groups, the IT department, the security department over here, and then the business and the business leaders over here. And so this is something, in our podcast with the amazing guests that we've had on, and the one that comes to mind is Manfred Boudreau-Demmer. He's the CIO of NATO, and he's just such a good example of somebody who has really gone through a journey of technology and security over on one side, but he's also a well-respected business leader as well. Speaking of people who are at high levels in large organizations, it's just very, very easy to talk to. So I can't say enough good about him. And he is one example of many out there of what a technology and a security leader might want to aspire to be and take the lessons learned. And so, we've been exploring this topic for a long time, and it's a language barrier, and it's the reality that IT departments are under-supported, underfunded, and they're a black box in a lot of cases to business leaders who are very smart people and very capable people, but maybe for whatever reason they don't want to look foolish by not understanding the technical terms, and they don't wade in. And then conversely, they're maybe a bit alienated by the fact that cybersecurity people and tech people are having geek talk, right? They're talking nerdy, and it's like, what are you guys talking about? So it would behoove both sides to learn each other's language, for the business people to learn technology and security at a business level, and why that's strategically important to them from a trust building perspective with their clients, because the data that they're handling represents individuals and sensitive corporate information, right? And then on the other side, it would behoove technical folks to understand how to speak business language and learn the strategic priorities of their business, and actually get a seat at that decision-making table instead of just demanding it and going, hey, I understand this is a priority. Here's what I'm proposing on the IT or the security roadmap that's actually going to help us achieve our mission there. And I think, going back to your question, Zach, I think that's maybe part of the solution or part of the path to building trust is empathy, to understand what the other side is dealing with, and learning each other's language and putting in an effort.
I think that's
a bridge, right?
Yeah, there's a bridge to be built there. And what I think is very interesting, let's imagine the shoe on the other foot. Let's imagine the chief revenue officer in a company says, the biggest threat to my sales pipeline is being disrupted by legal and compliance. I am going to create a zero trust framework around my pipeline where you're not permitted access to my sales, insights into the marketing unless you have permissions and we've given you access. And even then I can revoke your access at any time to my sales machine.
Sure.
That's immediately alienating to the organization.
Yeah.
And what I'm concerned is that when we lack trust in an organization, these kind of silos only further.
Yeah.
And so you talked about silos earlier. You talked even now about this gap and this divide within the organization where, the best security people should know how their security helps sales and grow the revenue. And the revenue people should be thanking the security people for protecting the revenue and their pipeline and their customers.
But Zach, this is hard. This is not an easy thing to do. This takes a lot of rethinking. It takes takes open-mindedness, open-heartedness, and a whole lot of learning, time and sweat to be able to move as a team. I mean, this wouldn't work in the military, right? When the military units got really siloed and they weren't, doing that move idea of working as a team, you start to get the silos.
The military is probably the highest trust, right? Yeah. If you do not trust the guy beside you, you're dead.
Yeah. Right? Life and death, right?
And you don't trust the people back at headquarters, the people in the air, the people, like, for every warfighter, there's 100 people or so, like, that they have to trust.
Yes.
To complete their mission. Like that's where I would love to kind of culminate here into like the digital trust stuff.
Sure.
Like, how does this help the world? The digital trust things, you got work at Safe House and Tynebridge and your podcast, you're talking to everybody about digital trust environments. Like, just maybe help me understand how this like really wins. I think I already understand. That's why I'm excited.
I think you get it. I think you could just preach the sermon, Zach. I think you own it now. But I think we've established, and tell me if you agree or disagree with this, trust is essential in relationships, right? Trust is currency in business, I would say. Mm-hmm. And so if you take that first point, we've established trust is important. If you're in business, you're in the relationship business. So trust is currency in business. Virtually every business is a digital business. Virtually every business has data in some sort, unless I've heard someone else say, unless you're selling tacos out of the back of your mom's Volvo, you're in a digital business and you're in a data business, right? So since trust is currency in business, every business is digital, every business is a data company, right? Then put those three concepts together and you have digital trust merged together. Mm-hmm. So think about what data represents, right? We have data, we have words on pages, we have videos, right? Well, audio files, video files, text files. What is that, right? That represents sensitive details about corporations, intellectual property. It represents, for say, cities and municipalities, the sensitive information of the constituents and the plans of the city, for example, moving forward. Operational technology environments, their water and sewer and light systems and all that stuff, sensitive financial details. So this all is information, if you think about personal data, that belongs to the person. And they're lending that information to an organization, right? They're putting it into your care. So an organization really has an ethical responsibility to make sure that that information is properly managed, that the privacy is respected, and that the information is protected with cybersecurity. So that's really the whole picture. And then it breaks down discipline by discipline, but none of those things should be left out, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the introduction to it. I don't know if
I think it's interesting that like some of the fundamentals of digital trust require the tearing down of silos that were built against mistrust, right?
Yes.
And so, like, you're saying, hey, if you want to actually jump this gap, and like, we live in a world of, especially, we didn't even talk about AI. I don't really want to, but like Aaron Levy says, data wants to be free.
Yeah.
And so we live in a world where data fundamentally wants to explode and go everywhere.
Yeah, it multiplies. It's created and it's multiplied, and it's got a life cycle, right?
That's right. Yeah. Data is like New York City rats. And like it just keeps coming and you can't get rid of it, and it's going to only be more. And like the idea of digital trust is to say, like, we have to go ahead and jump. And the companies that jump and learn to trust between themselves internally and trust outside, like the companies that are more what you might call like properly socialized and build a community inside and outside, like those are the companies that are going to withstand as every company is a technology company. Every company. And I think that's a very interesting place to invite people into.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the other side of that, Zach, is a company that is very reactive, and they're looking to kind of try to hide and looking to try to get away with as little as possible when it comes to the information that's in their hands, right? Mm-hmm. But when you're looking at the data, the multiplication of the data, it's stored, it's communicated, and then it's securely disposed of, hopefully at the end. But most organizations have this mountain of unstructured and dark data that they just don't know what data they have. And that can be a toxic asset, right? And so organizations can go, okay, well, if it is beneficial to our business, if, for example, an RFP requires that we have certain security measures, let's do the minimum, put those in place. The other approach, though, would be a more proactive and responsible and ethical approach, and a more transparent approach to say, let's know that this is the way the world works. Let's take our data stewardship responsibility seriously, our data handling seriously, and communicate that, because transparency creates trust, right? Mm-hmm. So we can say, here's what we're doing, what and why with your information. Here's what we're doing to protect it. If there's a problem, not everything's going to go perfectly. We will let you know. And we can demonstrate the standard to which that we're holding ourselves, a higher standard than average, and we're going above and beyond.
That's right. And I think that's probably where we can start landing this plane here. I think that's this has been really helpful for me to put pieces together around the idea of trust. Like you said, trust is currency, right? But it does seem more profound than that. It seems that like what's interesting to me about trust is it matters the most where something fails, something stumbles. Mm-hmm. And you say, hey, because we trust each other, we can get through this.
Yes.
Because you trust your vendor, because you trust your team, because you trust even if you're a buyer and you're like, hey, I gave you some data and you sent me a note that said we had a potential incident with your data. Mm-hmm. Like that can help build trust as long as it's authentic. Yes. But I can lean into it and I can actually ironically trust like my financial institution more, even if they had an incident at the bank.
Yes.
If they invite me into it, if they show up, and they say, this is as big a deal as you think it is. And they don't try to gaslight me, and they don't and they don't try to scare me too much. They're very honest and rational about it. I end up trusting them more because of the mistake. And I think that's an interesting thing when we start thinking internally about silos and what have you. So that's where my mind's going. So I'll leave you with anything closing.
Sure.
Declare victory.
Yeah, and I mean, in the spirit of landing the plane, and we could continue to take off, but I think we need to wrap it up here for today. So yes, trust is currency. Trust also reveals character, and to choose another C, it's capital or relationship capital. So similar, if you're dealing with a close friendship or a spouse, you're building that track record over time with transparency, letting the other person in the relationship know where you're coming from. And then when something contrary to that happens, well, they already know your character. You've already invested in that. And so you've built a bridge for them to walk on, the trust bridge.
That's great.
Yeah.
Love it. Christian Redshaw, you're the man. I really appreciate
Zach. Likewise.
coming in.
Really enjoyed it.
You got a podcast people can listen to. You've got a lot.
You're going to be shocked at it, but it's called the Digital Trust Podcast of all things. I bet you didn't see that coming.
No, I appreciate the integrity between the Google search and the podcast. It makes it
there
easy.
you go. We do intend to have you on as a guest in our next recording.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Sure the schedules align.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christian. You have a great day. Thanks everyone.
Zach.
See ya.